Hey, young people. Welcome to the Children's Room at the Red Bank Public Library. I'm Sira Williams, and I'm really glad that you're here for this session of Family Story Time on Race and Diversity. You know that we've been doing this program for almost 3 years. Amazing. But here's the thing. We never run out of things to talk about, and we never run out of great books to read. And so, of course, I have a wonderful book to share with you today, but it's Black History Month. And so we're going to focus on that, and I want to talk about the importance of history, about learning the whole truth when we talk about history, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And I want to maybe give you some ideas of things that you can do to learn about some Black history on your own as a family. So why is it important to talk about history, to learn history? Why do we even care about something that happened a long time ago? Well, there's a lot of expressions about history that I think are pretty valid. Have you heard anybody say, if you don't know where you came from, then you don't really know where you're going? Or those who don't know their history are bound to repeat it? Those are good ones. Maybe you should talk about. What I know is that history is always being rewritten. And sometimes that's because we learn new things. We discover new artifacts, or we uncover new stories from different people and different points of view that add to the fullness and the richness of the stories that we already know. Ooh, let me remind you of something. I forgot. I wanted to remind you, and we've talked about this before, but I don't want you to forget that in the word history, there is a smaller word that's super important, and it reminds us what history is all about. That word is story. History is just a collection of stories, real life, true stories of things that happened in the past. And so when we're thinking about these stories, we want to get the perspectives of everybody that was there and involved in those things that happened. And so, like I said, sometimes we learn new things, we get new pieces of a puzzle, and history, our knowledge of history changes. It gets rewritten. But sometimes our history can be upsetting and troubling, and our history can be erased to avoid learning about and talking about those troubling times. And so that's not good. That doesn't help us at all to move forward with knowledge and intention. I want to show you this example. What if I picked up this book? It's called Ruby Bridges. This is Your Time. It's about a real life time in history and this young girl's experience. And I picked up this book, I opened the pages, and there was a bunch of words blacked out. Somebody doesn't want me to really know what happened to little Ruby, right? Still, I might be able to read around it and get an idea of what happened, but it wouldn't be the whole story. Well, let's look at this example. What if somebody really didn't like this story, didn't want me to know about it, and they just cut a giant hole, they just took out a big chunk of the story? Number one, that's horrible. That's not helping me learn about what happened at all. Right? And why should somebody else make that decision for me? Maybe they don't like the story. Maybe it makes them uncomfortable, but this is what happened, and I have a right to know about it. So erasing or ignoring parts of our history is not helpful, and it's not good. Why am I telling you this? Because this is why we have these history and heritage months. It's so that we can learn other stories that we don't necessarily learn about in school. The history that we traditionally learn in our textbooks is told from the point of view of white men. And that's because throughout history, white men are the ones who've been in power. So their point of view is important, but it's not the only one, because Black people, Native American people, Asian people, Asian Americans, women have been here helping to build this country since before we were even America. And so their side of the story is important to getting the whole truth and nothing but the truth of what our history is. And if we ignore their part of the story, even if it's upsetting, because these are populations that were oppressed and not treated fairly. And if we ignore their sides of the story, that's just a continuation of that unfairness. And we don't want to do that. We want to write that, because their stories are American stories. Their history is American history. And so the good news is there's lots of other ways to learn about history besides what we learn in school, or to augment what we learn in school. And reading books is one of those things. So today I'm going to read this book to you. It's called Before She Was Harriet. It's by Lesa Cline-Ransome and illustrated by James E. Ransom. It's about a historical Black figure that you probably do learn about in school, Harriet Tubman. And you probably learn about her in relation to the Underground Railroad and all of the work that she did. But that's not her whole story. That's not her whole story. And so this book is going to give us a real insight into who she was. I'm going to stand up so you can see. Remember, we always try to look at all the pictures in a picture book because they're important to the story. So there's a railroad. Again, it's called Before She Was Harriet. Looks like she's waiting for that train, right? All right, here she sits, an old woman, tired and worn, her legs stiff, her back achy. But before wrinkles formed and her eyes failed, before she reached her twilight years, she could walk for miles and see clearly under a sky lit only with stars. Before she was an old woman, she was a suffragist, a voice for women who had none, in marriages, in courts, in voting booths. Before her voice became soft and raspy, it was loud and angry, rising above injustice. Before she was a suffragist, she was General Tubman, rising out of the fog, armed with courage, strong in the face of rebels and planters and overseers as they watched fields burn and bridges fall and 700 slaves stop chopping and start running to a woman who ferried them to freedom on the Combahee River turned River Jordan. Combahee, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name of that river, I'm sorry. Before she was General Tubman, she was a Union spy, carrying secrets across battlefields to soldiers fighting in the Civil War for President Lincoln to end slavery. Before she was a Union spy, she was a nurse, caring for those hit with bullets and hatred and fear, tending to them with bandages and words in the bloody dirt of Southern soil. Before she was a nurse, she was Aunt Harriet, daughter of Ben and Rit, who helped her parents flee their master and find their way through the woods and streams to the safety of Canada and a new home in the North. Before she was Aunt Harriet, she was Moses, a conductor on an underground railroad with no trains and no tracks, just passengers traveling to freedom up north through swamps, past slave catchers, across rivers, and under the cover of night. Seeking the promised land for her people, led by dreams and God and faith, a wisp of a woman with the courage of a lion. Before she was Moses, she was Minty of Maryland, of one slave owner and then others, who worked her, punished her with lashes, broke her back, but not her spirit. Before she was Minty, she was Araminta, a young girl taught by her father to read the woods and the stars at night, readying for the day. She'd leave behind slavery along with her name and pick a new one, Harriet. And then remember her days as a suffragist, as a general, as a spy, as a nurse, as Aunt Harriet, as Moses, as a conductor, as Minty, as Araminta, who dreamed of living long enough to one day be old and stiff and achy, tired and worn and wrinkled, and free. You see, she got on that train in the end. She was riding it. Well, I think this is a wonderful book, and I wanted to read it to you because I wanted you to see that at one time, this amazing, great woman of history started out as a kid named Minty. Have you ever thought of that? That just like you, every grown-up that you know, every person that you look up to, your mom, your dad, your grandma, grandpa, teachers, athletes, movie stars, musicians, coaches, whoever, started out as a kid just like you. So you know what that means. That means the sky's the limit for you. That means you can do anything because you're living in a world that none of those people could ever even dream of. I couldn't dream of the world you kids are growing up in today. Harriet Tubman lived in a time where there was no cars, no cell phones, no TVs, no airplanes, no computers, no access to information, and a time where she wasn't free. So this is where we get the expression that you kids, are your ancestors' wildest dreams. Even I am my ancestors' wildest dreams because we're living a life that they could never even imagine. And so you don't even know what your grandchildren, what the world will be like when your grandchildren are growing up. So our ancestors, all they want, or all they wanted, was for their children and their children's children to grow up in a world that was better than the one that they had. This is the dream of all families and all communities around the world since the beginning of time. We want our children to have a better life than we had. That means we want you to live in a world that's cleaner, that's healthier, that's safer, that's more peaceful, that's more free and more just. And so that's our dream. And that's why we need to know about our history so that we can move forward to make those dreams come true and to continue the improvements that have happened over time through history. So what can you do to learn about Black history this month? Besides reading books, you could watch a movie or a show. There's so many programs for children and adults and families that are streaming on various platforms this month for Black History Month. So I encourage you to find something and maybe watch together as a family. You could visit a museum. You know, we have the T. Thomas Fortune House right here in Red Bank. There's so much history in Red Bank that it's really fun to learn about, and you'll be amazed at all the great people that came from Red Bank and all the good work that they've done right here in our town. And that's what I want to encourage you to do, is start where you are. Maybe your own family tree. If not, look at the community around you. Wherever you are in America, there is a legacy of Black history there. I promise you that. And it will be very interesting no matter what that history is. So start doing some research, get online, and see what you can find out about Black history in your local area. I want you to remember that Black history is not just about slavery or the Underground Railroad or oppression and hard times. There's magnificent stories of inspiration that you will find. Look at some of the books behind me. I've got stories about scientists and inventors and athletes and poets and writers and entertainers. And there's just so many stories out there for you to become familiar with and to learn from. I encourage you to do it. Remember, the sky is the limit for you. That means you can do anything. You can do anything, and that's because of the people that came before you, who worked and fought and marched and lived their lives to make your life possible and better than theirs. So no matter what color you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what language you speak or religion you are or how you identify, you have great potential. And I want you to be grateful for the people that came before you to give you those opportunities. Remember that we can't change the past. We need to learn about the past. We can't change it. We shouldn't ignore it. We shouldn't black parts out that we don't want to know about. We should learn the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and then take that information and go forward and make the future even better for the next generations to come. All right? Hey, happy Black History Month. Spread a little peace and love while you're out there. I'm going to give you some, take some, and pass it on. And I'll see you next month. Thanks for joining me today. Bye, friends.